This week, we'll be welcoming some very special guests to Green Bay over at St. John the Evangelist Parish, the Sinsinawa Dominican Sisters. I have a very special place in my heart for all things Dominican, St. Thomas Aquinas, the Summa Theologiae, and of course the Dominicans in Rome who tried to educate me the last 4 years of seminary. And now I just learned that I have the privilege of being the pastor of a parish that was founded by a Dominican priest, the Venerable Samuel Natsu, whose death we're commemorating. It's the 150th anniversary of his death. And these sisters, the Dominican Sinsinawa sisters, were founded by him in 1847. So it's a very special time for us over at St. John's Parish, but I think for all of us here in the city of Green Bay. Why are they visiting us? Well, he founded St. John the Evangelist Parish in 1831, the oldest and first parish in all of Wisconsin. And also he founded, as I mentioned, the Sinsinawa Sisters down in the southwest corner of Wisconsin, in Sinsinawa, Wisconsin, in 1847. So St. John the Evangelist Parish predates the existence of our diocese by 37 years. So we celebrate the unique ministry of this wonderful priest that was declared venerable by Pope John Paul II in 1993. And of course now what we're waiting for are two miracles that can be attributed to his intercession so that he can be beatified and canonized. So my dear friends, if we need a miracle, let's remember to ask for that miracle through the intercession of Venerable Samuel Natsu. Since the pontificate of Pope John Paul II, there's been a great emphasis upon encouraging us as Christians to remember those great Christian heroes that we might have forgotten about that are from our immediate past, that were a part of the formation of our country here in the United States and throughout the world where there's been influential heroes. Pope John Paul, I think, understood it wasn't enough just to call to mind the great saints of hundreds of years ago, but to discover and be protected by and guided by the more recent saints. When I was up in Marinette, I was very much heard about and learned a lot about the venerable and now blessed Bishop Baraga, the first bishop of the Diocese of Marquette. And I believe there's been one miracle attributed to him, but they're just promoting knowledge about his great apostolate and his great work in ministry so that they can be inspired and guided by that. I never thought that I'd be the pastor of a parish founded by someone who's up for canonization. And it's kind of interesting, even before I got here, I was up in Marinette, and as soon as somebody learned that I was going to be appointed pastor of the cathedral in St. John's, they told me immediately about this Venerable Samuel Natsu and gave me a bunch of information. And I've known for almost 2 months about the visit of the Sinsinawa Dominican Sisters, who this priest founded. And so they've been giving me a lot of information to study. And finally, I sat down and had a chance to read about his life. What a fascinating story. What a source of inspiration for all of us. He was an Italian from Milan and a very young Dominican friar. And a bishop, I believe it was Bishop Fenwick from Cincinnati, Ohio, went over to Europe to plead for priests to come and assist him in this vast Northwest territory, which included, amongst other states, Michigan and Wisconsin. And he really touched the heart of this young Dominican friar. He came over in 1830, was ordained, I believe at the age of 24 or maybe 25, and immediately he was sent up, almost immediately, to St. Anne's on Mackinac Island. And from there, he immediately started to reach out to the Native Indians and the French Canadians that were the main population in the area. And he came all the way down here. It's got to be 280 miles at least, and came down here to found St. John the Evangelist Church. And he went back and forth. I mean, I can see why Pope John Paul II declared him venerable. He lived the Christian virtues to a heroic level. Learned some very interesting things. He established the first parish in what was known as Shantytown, up where you would find now Alloway's Cemetery. So he had a special place in his heart for the poor and built his church, you could say, in their midst. And at the same time established the Menominee Free School, whose focus was to reach out to those that were disadvantaged, the Menominee people that were struggling to adapt to the new world. And that tradition at St. John's really has continued. You can almost see the spirit of Father Samuel Mazzucchelli very much alive. For some time, St. John the Evangelist had a connection to assisting the Hmong who came to our area. Now it's the deaf community and the homeless shelter. So his spirit lives on in many ways. I learned some interesting facts, too. We're right here on Doty Street. And, sometimes you got to ask yourself, who are these streets named after? Do you know any Dotys? I don't know any Dotys. I wonder if they're still around. But I found out that it's in all likelihood named after Judge Doty, a good friend of the Venerable Samuel Mazzucchelli, because it wasn't enough for him to have a parish up in Mackinac Island and one down here in Green Bay. He decided he wanted, or maybe he was asked by the bishop, I don't know, but he took a trip out to Prairie du Chien. And Judge Doty, friend of his, went with him on a 225-mile journey to establish a school for the Winnebago Indians. And I found out that there was two very important ladies that worked with him with this school that he founded here, which eventually its descendant or successor is now working with the Menominee people over in Kashina. So it got moved from this area when the Menominee people were forced to leave this area. But the two lead teachers, Rosalie Dousman, probably is what Dousman Street is named after, and Elizabeth Grignon. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. And I've driven on that street as I go to the Oddfellows nursing home. So his spirit is very much alive. Those who worked with him have been honored with streets named after him. I think we'll have to find a street to name after Father Mazzucchelli. And after about 5 years of ministry in this part of the state, when other priests came to help, he went and pretty much settled in what is now the southwest corner of Wisconsin. But there were no borders down there at the time, so he ended up helping out in parts of Illinois, in that area, Iowa, and Minnesota. And I learned that his spirit is influenced. You can see it in other ways. If you have a chance to visit Schulzburg, Wisconsin, you'll see a bunch of streets named by him, and you'll figure it out pretty quickly. But there's names like Truth Street, Charity Street, Mercy Street, and so forth. Just Google Schulzburg and then kind of zoom in, and you'll see all the interesting Christian names and virtues that he used to name some of the streets. But he had a hand in establishing 40 parishes in his ministry from 1830 to 1864, when he died at the age of 57. And he had a hand in building nearly 30 churches. 4 are still in use: St. Gabriel's in Prairie du Chien, St. Michael's in Galena, Illinois, St. Anthony's in Davenport, Iowa, and St. Patrick's in Benton, Wisconsin, where he died and is buried. He died the way I would like to see myself die, very heroic, romantic way. I might take it back later, but he was called out for a sick call, and it was a terrible storm, but he went out anyway to assist this person, and he got pneumonia because of that sick call, and he died not long after. But that's the way for a priest to go out. But I learned he was very much an advocate for the Native Americans, and stood up for them when so many of us really treated them like second-class human beings. For example, he challenged the President, Andrew Jackson, and corresponded with him and begged him to be a little gentler with the people, the Native Americans. In fact, you'll see that park named after Andrew Jackson just down the road here on Madison, separating St. John's from the cathedral. So you see sign of those times in the early 19th century. But he challenged him to not cause this trail of tears of constantly moving the Indians west off of good lands to not so good lands. And he believed in teaching the Native Americans in their own language. He respected their culture, although he recognized that it needed to be purified, just like the European culture, just like our culture of today. But he saw the good in it, and he wanted to preserve the language. He translated the New Testament into the Menominee language, a prayer book and a hymnal also. He compiled a Menominee liturgical almanac, which was printed in 1834. I understand it was the first book printed in Wisconsin, before Wisconsin even existed. And he also put together a prayer book in the Winnebago language. So he won the respect of the Menominee and Winnebago peoples. And as I said, he eventually settled in southwest Wisconsin. My dear friends, I think we have a lot of great saints that are woven into the history of the Northwest Territories and the states that were eventually carved out of it. We just need to take the time to appreciate them and come to know them. And I'm grateful that the Sinsinawa sisters will be visiting us. And if you have a chance, I hope you come, and if not, join us for the 10:45 Mass. Join us for the light luncheon and the talk that the sister will give. I think it's Sister Kennedy, after the Mass. It was St. Ignatius, at least I remember this story, St. Ignatius, who noticed how important it was for us to include in our spiritual reading the reading about the lives of the saints and coming to know these saints and letting them inspire us. St. Ignatius' conversion occurred. He was a very good soldier, and he was injured, and he was laid up, and he was kind of going stir-crazy looking for things to do, so he asked for any books he could find, and he had a preference before his conversion for romances and knight-errant stories and stuff like that, kind of the equivalent of our action films today. But eventually he ran out of those books, and somebody gave him a book about the life of Christ and then about the lives of the saints, and he noticed something. He noticed that when he took time to just read these romance novels or these heroic stories, they brought joy at first, but then he felt an emptiness as it wore off. But when he read about the life of Christ and about the life of the saints, it stayed with him. A sense of peace, a sense of inspiration, a sense of strength. And I would encourage everyone here to take time to come to know the life of Bishop Baraga, Venerable Samuel Matsu Kelly, and some of the local saints, or some that might be declared saints. I think there's great inspiration and consolation for us. Many times, as we come to know the saints, we'll see parallels with our own lives and find inspiration there for ourselves. We'll see how they dealt with some of the same struggles, and we'll see how by the grace of God they passed through them. I think that Blessed or Venerable Samuel Matsu Kelly in certain ways worked many miracles in his ministry in this area from 1831 to 1864. And in so many ways we see signs of his spirit and presence all around us, watching over us, shepherding us. I encourage us to come to know him and ask him for his intercessions. If there's a special miracle you need, or someone in your family, ask for it through his intercession. We see it in Jesus' ministry. Sometimes he left very sad from certain towns, and he leaves saying, in the gospel writer would write, and he left, and he could work very few miracles there because of their lack of faith. And I think sometimes that's the same reason that miracles aren't worked through the intercession of some of these recent saints, and they're not canonized. They just remain venerable. Maybe we haven't asked for their intercession. So let us get to know them. Let them be a source of inspiration for us. Let's ask for their prayers. I think God will smile on us. And if you have a chance, come join us to listen to the Sinsinawa sisters after the 10:45 Mass.